wants the first question? Peter.
Governor, even though the budget is currently in the hands of the legislature, do you plan to propose any major revisions to reflect maybe a sense of your own priorities?
I think the saying is, Peter, that the governor proposes and the legislature disposes of the budget. I look forward to working with the legislative leadership on Oregon state budget.
Okay, as a quick follow-up, some education groups have asked that you rework the budget to propose a state school fund of as much as $8 billion, but Senator Devlin, the Senate co-chair, says that would be almost impossible without new revenue.
I'm very committed to stable and adequate funding for education. My priorities are making sure we reduce class size and close the achievement gap. I assume there'll be a lot of wrestling over the education budget, and I look forward to working with them to come up with a number that we can use.
Governor, did John Kitzhaber, any member of his administration, or Sylvia Hayes ask you to pardon them if they're convicted of any crimes?
No.
Would you? There's been a whirlwind of events. Are you stunned right now? Is this surreal for you?
This has definitely been a bittersweet moment for me. I really respected Governor Kitzhaber's leadership. I'm also excited about having an opportunity to put my own imprint on Oregon, but definitely it's been a bittersweet moment.
Will you renew the moratorium on the death penalty?
Did you have a question already? You haven't had one yet.
Okay.
Have you had one yet?
Yes.
Okay, then I'm going to come back to you in a minute. Hannah.
So you mentioned the achievement gap. Are you going to put forward any proposals to address that?
Well, as you know, Hannah, that in my role as the Oregon Secretary of State, we did an audit on this particular issue. While I have nothing specific in mind, the audit made very clear recommendations about how middle schools can close the achievement gap between white students and students of color. Obviously, that is an issue that I will continue to work on.
Yeah, what's your view on the death penalty, and are you going to continue the governor's say?
Well, I certainly, and this might shock you, Jeff, but I certainly agree that with the Oregonian that there needs to be a broader discussion about fixing the system. Until that discussion, I am upholding the moratorium, or I will be upholding the moratorium imposed by Governor Kitzhaber. I am continuing to discuss with legal counsel those issues.
So, Governor, would you consider pardoning Governor Kitzhaber if he's convicted of any crimes?
At this point in time, any response to that question would be speculative. The governor has not been charged with anything.
Yesterday, the revenue forecast indicated a likely kicker. What do you see as being the future of the kicker policy in your administration? Well,
we'll certainly be discussing the kicker policy with the legislative leadership. I think what was pleasing for me about the revenue forecast is the fact that the economy is growing, albeit slowly in Oregon. And I think our challenge is to make sure that the economy is growing in every single part of the state, including our rural communities. Chris.
Governor Kitzhaber was criticized even by some in the Democratic Party for not being accessible. Do you have a plan to be more accessible to people like my friend Jeff Mapes, and will you consider weekly conferences, for example?
Jeff's your friend? Yes. Okay. I'm so sorry. You know, Governor Kitzhaber and I have very different personalities, so I think my own personality will shine through in its own way. I've specifically asked my communications director, Kristen Granger, to come up with recommendations about how we can have regular interactions from the press. I would hope we avoid the late evening TV cameras as I'm walking into my house. But we are open to some suggestions. So if you have some great ideas, which I know you often do, Pat, I look forward to hearing them.
Are you planning on living at Mahoney Hall?
Yeah, great question. Mr. Little and I are very excited about moving into Mahoney Hall. We will be working with the transition team to make that happen as quickly as possible. I heard from Governor Kulongoski and First Lady Mary Oberst what a great neighborhood it is. My communication director also lives in the neighborhood, so we're pretty excited about it. The downside is that I don't have a dog at this time, so I won't be able to join in all the dog parties that apparently happen. So. Okay, Jonathan.
Are you going to run in
in 2016 to keep the seat?
Jonathan, with all due respect, I am focused on governing right now. We have a legislative agenda that we want to work on. We have a budget we need to pass, and that's where my focus is right now.
Governor.
Go ahead.
You're now the chair of the Oregon Education Investment Board. What is your plans for that board? Do you support it? Do you support the Kitzhaber priorities that were coming out of it?
My first act as Oregon governor yesterday morning was to visit Rosa Parks Elementary School in North Portland. I got to see the wonderful things they're doing there in the classrooms. I am committed to staying very engaged on education policy. As I mentioned earlier, my priority is to make sure that we have adequate funding for our schools so that we can reduce class size and close the achievement gap.
What do you feel is the future of the Oregon Education Investment Board, except for review?
It is definitely. As I said, I plan to be very engaged in education policy as we move forward. You had a question over here?
Yeah. While this transition was going on, the legislature was still moving lightning fast. Last week, we saw almost 4-hour floor debate in the Senate on clean fuels. That passed. It might be up for a floor vote next week. Do you plan to sign that bill or any of the other big bills that have been coming through so far?
Well, I know there are a handful of bills moving very rapidly through the legislature. I can commit to you that I will sign the new motor voter bill, which is up on the House floor this morning. So I definitely will sign that bill. Everything else we'll be reviewing on a case-by-case basis.
What about on the clean fuels bill?
Did you have one already?
Well, I did, but I think everybody else did too.
Hang on just a minute. I'll come back.
Thank you, Governor. What's your stance on the vaccines bill and when that removes personal exemptions?
I think that's Senate Bill 342. 442. I am going to have to get up to speed on my numbers. I support having our children be vaccinated unless they have a medical reason not to.
Are there any policies or bills that haven't got a lot of energy behind them that you think will now that this transition has happened?
I think it's fair to say that the new motor voter bill has even more energy behind it now.
Any others?
Not off the top of my head. Dick, have you had a question yet?
No.
Okay.
To step back, you started things rolling with a very unusual statement on a Thursday, I think it was, a week ago. Can you reflect on the effect of that statement and why you decided it was so important to do this? I mean, people have used unprecedented for that statement for everything that's happened.
I appreciate that question, Dick. As you know, I was in Washington, D.C. A little over a week ago, serving as president of our National Association of Secretaries of State. It's an organization that I've been very involved with, and presiding officer, and we've been planning the conference for the last 6 months. I received a phone call on Tuesday afternoon from Governor Kitzhaber asking me, he wanted me to speak one-on-one. So we got on an airplane. I got on an airplane Wednesday morning. It was the quickest we could get a flight back to Portland, and met with Governor Kitzhaber personally that afternoon at the Port of Portland. You know, as I mentioned in my statement, it was really important for me, for Oregonians to know that he did in fact call me, and I came home at his request.
Did you intend with the statement to sort of convey, I mean, I think a lot of people read the statement and thought that you were suggesting that he might not be in a good mental state. Did you intend to convey that? Do you have any regrets that it may have conveyed that?
My purpose in issuing the statement was so that Oregonians knew the truth about what had happened.
Did he truly ask you what you were doing there? Like he couldn't figure out what you were doing there?
My recollection is that was the first thing that he said to me, yes.
Your address on Wednesday mentioned an expanded role of some sort for the Ethics Commission. What specifically do you have in mind?
Well, I have brought on Gina Zedlik, and please don't ask me to spell her last name for you, as my senior policy advisor. She is going to be tackling the issues of both ethics reform and public records reform. As I mentioned in my remarks, there's a couple of key pieces that I feel are critically important. First of all, we need to have dedicated and more resources for the Government Ethics Commission. I think that's critically important. Secondly, the governor gets to essentially veto the caucus leaders' appointments to the Government Ethics Commission. I think that needs to change. And then lastly, we need to make sure that both in the governor's office and the governor's staff, that there's no outside compensation for state business. So we'll be working with staff on a number of those proposals. As you know, Representative Parrish has introduced a number of bills as well. I am optimistic that this can be a bipartisan effort.
Governor, in turning over a new leaf and moving forward, why have you retained some of the governor's previous staff, particularly his communications staff?
That's a great question. I will point out that Kristen Granger is our new director in communications. So the first priority for me, given where we are in the legislative session and given the fact that we were 2 or 3 weeks in process, is for me to have a smooth transition. I've certainly replaced some key positions, Brian Chipley, my chief of staff, Kristen Granger, and my legal counsel. But we're going to be evaluating other staff positions on a case-by-case basis. The bottom line, though, is that I expect all of my staff people and their behavior to align with my ethics requirements, my principles around ethics, and that means no outside compensation for state business. I have to say the other thing is that this has been an incredibly difficult transition for them, both personally and professionally, and I just want to say thank you to the current staff. They're extremely dedicated. This has been a difficult time, and I value their institutional knowledge greatly. Okay, who hasn't had one yet?
Can you describe your feelings on the floor when you were taking the oath of office? What's it feel like?
It was very bittersweet. That's the best word that I can say. So, the back?
I was just wondering if you have talked to Kitzhaber since you resigned. Has he said anything to you since you took office?
Yes, I have. We had a meeting on Monday. It was actually very productive. We had a great conversation. He talked to me about his legislative priorities and his recommendations.
I'm going to repeat Jeff's question on clean fuels. You've seen it, and you've probably seen that the Republicans are tying it to Sylvia Hayes, pointing out that the subpoena asked for documents related to the clean fuels program.
In terms of clean fuels, the legislature passed the original clean fuels bill in 2009. For me, clean fuels translates into cleaner air for Oregonians. I think that's a good thing.
What's going to be done about the backlog at OHA for people waiting to get on OHP, and if Oracle cuts the software at the end of the month, what's the state going to do?
I think we need to move quickly. I've already met with folks on health issues, and we're going to move quickly to make sure. One of my top priorities, and this has been a priority for me, frankly, since I came into the legislature back in 1991, is to make sure that all Oregonians have access to the health care that they need. Way in the back.
Governor, majority of your campaign support comes from the teachers union, and at the same time we have the worst graduation rates in the country. Can you use one to fix the other, and what is your immediate strategy laid out to reduce the graduate or reverse the graduation rates?
Okay, I'll talk first about the campaign contributions, and as you know, I worked in the last decade to make sure that Oregon has a very transparent campaign finance reporting system, and I think that's a very good thing. In terms of the graduation rate in Oregon, as I mentioned, a couple key priorities, closing the achievement gap and reducing class size. The governor's policy, the former governor's policy on early education, he has a package around early education. I'm very committed to moving forward on that policy. I think that will help us with the graduation rate. So, thank you.
What about in terms of if everybody's
Okay, wait a
had their
minute.
questions?
Did everybody have their first question? Go ahead.
Public trust has obviously been shattered. You talked about that during your swearing speech. What's your plan to make Oregon government more transparent?
Well, we will, of course, be releasing public records, as many public records as we can, as quickly as possible. I've also spoken with the Attorney General about providing special counsel to help us make sure that the records that we can release will be released in an orderly manner. As I mentioned, we will be looking at the public records legislation. I know that the Attorney General is also working on that issue as well. So.
Governor, you're in this unique situation where you're having to hit the ground running because the session's in progress. How are you addressing that unique challenge?
It is a bit like drinking out of a fire hose, and I'm working as hard as I can, making sure I get up to speed as many issues as possible. The bottom line is, I have been in this building since I was 31 years old. I know the players well. I love working the legislative process. I know I can work closely with both Democrats and Republicans. I'm confident that we will be able to move Oregon forward together.
Governor, can you talk about the Longshore situation a little bit?
Sure.
Where are you on that? And it looks like the union wants to have the capability of firing the arbitrator if that arbitrator doesn't agree with them.
The port situation is a top priority for me. I have no intention of losing the 900 jobs that it would entail for both urban and rural Oregon. I've asked to meet with the authorities at the port and the union to discuss options. And as you know, in my first official act, I issued a press release regarding the situation yesterday. Okay, who hasn't had a question yet? Okay.
I know that you had addressed rural policy a little bit, but one thing specifically Kitzhaber had proposed about $50 million, I believe, for water projects, and the Umatilla Basin one was very close. What's your position on that? Should that be maintained in the budget?
I anticipate we will maintain that in the budget. I haven't spent an extensive amount of time, but I've certainly been over to Hermiston a number of times, talk with folks on the ground. I know how critical it is to the economy in that area, so look forward to working with folks to make sure we get some more resources into that project. Okay.
Governor, as far as the pending records requests, the law gives you a number of exemptions that you can use to either withhold records or that allow you to release them. What will be your default setting? Will you be using those exemptions to withhold records, or will you be using your discretion to release them?
Nick, as I mentioned earlier, my goal is to get the records released as quickly as possible, as many records as that we are able to release. We're going to bring on assistance from the Attorney General's office, special legal counsel to help us in doing that, so we can get the information to you. As you might imagine, there's a huge backlog.
Last question. Transportation policy. I apologize, but groups are already negotiating a financing package, and I wonder if you have yet decided what your role in that might be.
Suffice to say, I think it's really important for our economy that we have a good transportation infrastructure. I look forward to working with folks to make that happen.
Are you concerned on the clean fuels policy that what do you think of the Republican statements that they won't support the transportation package if that bill gets signed into law?
Thanks, Jeff. As I mentioned, we'll be taking these bills on a case-by-case basis. In terms of clean fuels, I support making sure that Oregonians have clean air to breathe. The reality is that the legislature passed that legislation in 2009 for the first time, so the legislature is very committed to passing it.
Do you have a feeling about $15 minimum wage and mandatory sick time?
I think we're going to let you off the hook and have you take the last question, get the last question. But yes, I certainly support increasing the minimum wage. I look forward to talking with economists in terms of making sure we do that in a way that's careful and thoughtful. But I really think the ball is in the legislative court at this point in time, and I look forward to working with the legislative leadership to tackle that issue. So,
thank you, Governor.
Thank you all very much.